Hey guys, this is Caleb with DSLRvideoshooter.com. Today we're going to look at the Canon T3i. This is Canon's most recent HDSLR, so DSLR that has video, and they really combine a lot of things with this particular camera. Price range is just above T3i and below the 60D. So today we're going to look at a couple things. We're going to look at the build. You know, how does it feel compared to a lot of the other cameras? We're going to look at what's new with the camera compared to the others, and we're also going to take a look through all the menus and the different settings that are available, and of course check out the zoom feature, which is brand new to Canon's line of DSLRs that are shooting video. So my first impressions of the camera were it's almost identical to the T3i in the actual build quality. The flip out screen feels a lot like the 60D, so for those of you that have worked with the 60D, this is a lot like that. And the rest of it, the buttons feel much like the T3i. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and just jump straight into the menus. Alright, so let's go ahead and hit menu. And the first thing you're going to notice in the menu is that we have three menu items just that have the video symbol on there. So starting from the beginning, the very first thing you're going to see is movie exposure. This is just simply you know, having exposure, whether it be set to manual or auto. So there I have manual set up. And if I go back in here, go back to auto, it's going to automatically kind of take over the camera and adjust all the settings to try to get correct exposure. The next one you'll notice is just the AF mode. The next one on here is autofocus with shutter button. So if you never want to be doing autofocus when you're shooting video, you can just disable this, and you know, it's not gonna try to focus there. And then down here, these are different locks. So this is where you could have just one or two things be locked in place. So for instance, you could have auto exposure and locked and autofocus, or locked and no auto exposure locked. So but I just leave them both locked there. That kind of gives you more of your manual. Remote control, we have that turned off because we don't have any you know, remote for it. Highlight tone priority, we want to leave this off, but you're given it right here as opposed to somewhere else in the menu system. And then the second menu item is where we get the most. You'll be changing this quite a bit. So this is kind of the menu where everything happens. We have our movie record size, so I just shoot at 24 if at all possible, but we have 1920 at 30, 1920 at 24, 1280 at 60, 640 by 30. So we'll go back to here, and you'll notice I'm using the my index finger on the scroll wheel on the top of the camera, but if I use the left to right, you'll see at the bottom there we have our digital zoom. This is where the magic happens for the zoom on this camera. So there's the off position, and then there's the 3 to 10. Now, this is the one thing that I don't know if a lot of people knew, but 3 to 10, so what that means is 3 to 10 times magnification on your zoom, which means you're gonna not be able to get as wide as having it off. So it's not like a normal camcorder where you either zoom all the way out and all the way in. You're stuck with 3 to 10 times. So there's no 2 times, there's no 1 times. You're stuck with 3 to 10. So if you actually turn on zoom, you're going to notice that you're going to lose that wider section of the zoom. So that's something to keep in mind, is you're going to be stuck with a longer zoom function. So, and when we get into zoom more, you'll be able to see some examples of that. So for now, we'll just leave that off. Sound recording, here we have our audio set up. Right now it's set to manual. You have auto or disable, which you should never ever use. because if you're trying to link up any kind of audio, you always want to have at least auto gain control, if not manual. So we have it set to manual. You go down and you select this, and you're able to change your recording level from louder and louder and louder, test 1, 2, all the way back down. So that's kind of handy. They give you lots of settings. It's not like you're stuck with 8 or something like that. Wind filter, might as well leave that on. And we'll go back to the menu. So there's your audio. Grid, so, you know, same grids that we're used to seeing a lot of. Nothing new there. Video snapshot. This is really retarded. I don't know who thought of this and what they were smoking. Some guy that probably doesn't do anything with video thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had this cute little function where, you know, it only records 8 seconds at a time or 4 seconds at a time, and then you can stitch it together to make this cute little video snapshots. It's pretty dumb, so I would just leave that off and shoot your own. So that's that for the retarded setting there. Final one, exposure compensation. And then custom white balance. So that's where you would set your custom white balance for your camera, and then your picture styles. And there's something interesting here I haven't seen before, and that's auto under your picture styles. They have the standard portrait, landscape, neutral, monochrome, and then the user defined. But they also have this auto one, which I would seriously consider steering away from. Just stick with standard if you want something more standard, but stay away. That auto, I have no idea what that's going to do. It's going to get in there and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So I would definitely avoid that if at all possible. All right, and that's our functions there. Now we just have a few photo settings that we've seen before, and then just your reviews, standard stuff here. So that's the menus. Right now I have the camera set up. I'll hit info to go from nothing to just my settings at the bottom. There we see our little M with the microphone. We know we're shooting in manual. We hit this again. Here's our settings here, and we hit the Q button, and that's where we're able to adjust this stuff. Under white balance, we don't have Kelvin, which is a bummer. That's what I was real excited about. Is I really, to be honest, I won't shoot on a DSLR unless it has Kelvin, if I can avoid it at all possible. It's just really handy to have that, to be able to set your white balance using Kelvin. Most operators are used to that. We're used to being able to have that control, and we know our temperatures in tungsten or daylight, and just being able to dial those in is really nice. So that's a real bummer. That's probably one of the bigger things for me. So you can use custom, but it's kind of tricky because you don't know, you're letting the camera deal with it. Auto, you know, that's worst case scenario. So I find with like the T3i and T3i, I'm living either on tungsten, which is what this lighting setup is right now, or if I'm outside or using LEDs or any kind of light that's set to 56, I'll just leave it on, oops, there we go. I'll leave it on daylight. So for this kind of setting, I'd set it down to tungsten, and then from there, I know it's not gonna change. And then in post, if I needed to adjust it a little warmer, cooler, or what have you, I can do that from here. And now we're gonna take a look at the zoom feature. The zoom feature on the T3i is probably what really sets it apart from all the other cameras. I was actually pretty impressed with it, and we're gonna look closely at how it works. But to the actual concept of how the zoom feature works, it really isn't optical. And so like this zoom lens right here, this is a zoom lens, so when I'm actually changing it, it's optically zooming, whereas the zoom feature built into the camera is digital. So what you're going to actually have is the image is being cropped and zoomed into. So if you can imagine opening up a file in your editing software and zooming into it, I do this a lot with in Final Cut. If I'm working on a project and I need to crop something out or change the framing, I'll just punch in just a little bit digitally, so I blow up the image and then crop. That's essentially what you're doing with this feature on the T3i. So it's not really the greatest image quality, but what's important is it just gives you another option. And to start zooming, you just turn it on in the menu, and then on your camera there is, on the very top next to the ISO button, a display button, or DISP, and you're gonna hit and hold that. And while you're holding down that button, there is also the zoom and punch out on the top right side of the camera, right where your thumb is. You'll be able to use those to then zoom in and out. Okay, so now we're going to take a closer look at the zoom function on the T3i. And what I have here is I'm running standard definition out of the camera and into my laptop, just so you guys can see you know, the viewfinder and what I'm dealing with here. Okay, so now that we have the image in focus, we're going to play around with the zoom feature. And how you do this is you just go into your menu or hit the Q button when you're shooting or when you're using live view. And when I hit that, I got my options. I want to keep it at 1920 by 24, and I'm going to go over and click on 3 to 10. That's 3 to 10 times. Let me up my settings here so you can just see a little better. That's 3 to 10 times. Now, like we said earlier, let me go ahead and turn it back off. You either have the zoom off or you have 3 to 10. There's no 0 to 10. So if you're in a tight situation, that zoom's gonna keep you stuck at least 3 times. And that's a big difference when you look at that again. So here's full at 135 millimeter, turning on the zoom, and that's 3 times. That's as wide as we can go with the zoom feature on. Now if you're on a prime, you're stuck with that. Since I have a zoom, I can go back out a little bit, but that just goes to show that if you're in a tight situation, that can be kind of painful, and but so be it. Now if we're gonna actually zoom, what we need to do is, once we have the zoom feature on like we do, you just hold down the display button, which is on the top of the camera right next to the ISO button, and then you're able to click on the little magnifying glass buttons for zoom out and zoom in. And you'll notice when I hold this down, you'll see on the lower right we have a little loading bar that shows us how far we are. And what I'll do is, if you go to the DSLRvideoshooter.com and go to this post, you'll find 3 files that you can download. One at 3 times, one at 5 times, and one at 10 times. So if you want to pull those down and take a look at, they're just going to be raw files straight off of the camera. So you can kind of take a peek and see how they do. The image does get softer and noisier. This could be a feature that you either have an image or you don't, if you have to zoom in. And while you could do it in post, it's nice to be able to zoom live. So it's not the greatest zoom out there. Obviously it's digital, so there's some cons to it, but hey, I'll take it over nothing. The next thing we're going to take a look at is audio. The T3i has a couple audio options. The auto gain control is available for those that don't want to have to deal with setting levels, but more importantly, it also offers manual audio, which is it is manual in that you can set the input and the level, but you're not able to meter and watch those levels. So it's really nice though. I mean, out of the two, I'd much prefer this. For things like this, a podcast or web stuff, or if you're in a situation where you can't have something like an H4n, which I have just out of frame up here, which is what this podcast is being used to record, it's really nice to have. So that's a big plus for me. I do like that a lot in the cameras. Sadly, my 7D, which we're shooting this on, doesn't have it. So. But I want to go ahead and show you and compare the quality between something like an H4n and the actual camera. So what I'm going to do is take this cable It's an 1/8 to 1/8 two male ends. We're gonna come out of the H4n and go into the camera's mic output and use the manual audio, and then you'll be able to hear the difference between just the H4n and then the camera. So let's go ahead and plug that in, and I'm gonna go ahead and go over here, open up the flap on the side. I'm gonna plug it into the microphone. There it is. And as I'm talking just talking normally, I'm going to go ahead and select manual, and I'm going to then go over to record level, click on that, and it looks like I'm peaking a little bit, so I'm gonna bring that down to just over 12, but not getting close to 0. That looks good so far. Maybe a little lower there. Okay. And what's interesting about what we're doing here is we're actually not using the camera's microphone. I'll go ahead and show you what that sounds like as well. But we're using the H4n's microphone, which is much higher quality than the camera's, but we're running it to the actual camera. So, you know, you could grab a Rode mic or your H4n and just come out of the headphone jack and go into your camera. If you do want to monitor the audio coming from your H4n, you could put a splitter on there. And what I do a lot of the time is I'll still use the H4n and record onto the SD card on the H4n, but I'll also run it to my camera. So that gives me 2 options in post. So if something goes wrong here, I've got it backed up there. So that's a really good solution and another plus to having audio on your camera. So I am now going to go over and just start recording on the T3i. And let's go ahead and do this right here in the edit. So what you're listening to right now is the H4n audio. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the T3i. So H4n, T3i. So in the edit, I'm going to cut and you'll hear T3i. That's what you're hearing right now. So that's using the H4n's microphone going into the T3i. So again, here's the T3i, H4n. So we're doing H4n right now. Now we're back to the T3i. And the next thing I'm going to do is actually unplug the H4n. And I am going to stop recording on the T3i. Go back to my menu. And I'm going to turn the recording level up. And now we're just going to see what the camera sounds like. Test 1, 2, testing. There it is. Go back, start recording. So now what you're hearing, and I'll face this toward me so it's a little more accurate, but now what you're hearing right now is the T3i audio, the built-in microphone in the actual camera. It's not the greatest microphone in the world, but if you need to capture audio and not have the auto gain control, it is an option. So that's what you're hearing right now. And we're going to switch back to the H4n now. And now you hear just what's coming out of the H4n. So not the greatest in the world, but it's a really nice option. So overall, I'm pretty impressed with the T3i. It's essentially taking a 60D and a T2i and kind of mashing them together. The flip out screen, I know some of you were asking whether it felt strong or sturdy. I think it feels just fine. It doesn't feel flimsy at all. I mean, it's pretty much identical to the 60Ds flip out. So for those that are familiar with that, it's just like that. The rest of the body is very much like the T2i. So where does this camera kind of fit into the line? Well, I would recommend, if you can, instead of getting a T2i, moving up to the T3i. I have no doubt that the guys over at Magic Lantern are working on a hack for this. So for those that are interested in that, I'm sure they're going to have something for this camera as well. The flip out's huge though. It really changes the way you're able to shoot and operate your camera. If you use viewfinders, you're going to have to do something a little different because you can't really stick a frame on here, or else you won't be able to actually go over and close it completely. So that's something to consider, but I think it's well worth going to the T3i as opposed to the T2i. unless you're really looking for a dirt cheap camera. So that concludes this review of the T3i. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments or send me an email. Would love to hear from you. And also definitely check out DSLRvideoshooter.com to download the files if you want to see the zoom feature and the actual full res files right off of the camera. And I'm gonna sign off now, but I'll leave you with a couple images showing you the difference in the zoom of some stuff I shot. So check that out, check out the site, and we look forward to hearing from you.